We have finally arrived to CSS, the exciting part of this course. CSS is just a large monstrosity of a technology. You can do so many crazy things with CSS. You can start styling. Some people even created animations, like full-on cartoons with CSS, or like 3D looking objects, faking 3D models, and just a bunch of crazy stuff. But let's get started very simple for now. Super simple, just styling this red H1 that we have here. So before we start, I actually want to show you a few ways we can connect our CSS to our HTML. So there's 3 ways you can start styling your HTML. So first of all, what I want to do is actually get rid of this contact and just everything else. I don't want your message, Windows. Goodbye. Okay. So the first method is to directly style the element using an attribute. So I can go directly to the element and style it here. So the way you do that is you add an attribute of style like this. And if you hit enter, you can choose from all of these different styles. The one we're going to look at is color. So let's do this color, and let's choose one here. Crimson, why not? So as you can see, the syntax kind of looks like this. You say color, then you have a colon, then you give it the name, and then you do a semicolon. And that's it. If we hit save, boom, there we go. We have our red color. Yay, awesome. Okay, so is this a good method to do it? Not really. There's 2 problems with it, I would say. It kind of bloats your HTML. It adds unnecessary things in here, and it just makes it harder for you to read. So I wouldn't really recommend this method. And also, if you want to style multiple elements, you would have to add the style tag to all of them, and it just makes it a bit more cumbersome. So we are not going to do that. Let's get rid of it like this. Perfect. The second way you can do is you can go all the way down here and you can add a style tag like this, and you can hit tab, okay? And in this style tag, you can start styling your CSS. So I'm going to show you a quick way we can select it, but I'm going to cover this in a later video. Here you can do something like this, color red. All right, hit save, and as you can see, we have the color red. This is a bit of a better way, just because you're not really adding anything on top of the HTML elements, but it's still not a super nice way because we're still adding both HTML and CSS in the same file. So it can get quite large after a while, and it's just not as nice. So the best way is to remove everything and just keep your HTML in here. Nothing else. You just have your HTML in here, and we specifically create another file for that. Typically, let's go here. You're going to see a file named style.css. That's what people most commonly use. So let's name it like that, okay? So style.css. And I've actually kind of covered this, and it's a bit of a spoiler, but we kind of did it the same way with the link here. So the icon, all we have to do is literally just come here in the head and say link, hit tab, and the relationship here is going to be style sheet. So we clarify what kind of file we want to attach here in the header, and the head, my apologies, not header. And the href is just going to link to the file. So I can say /style.css, and literally that's it. So simple. So let's move on to the next video, and we're going to see how we can mess around and make this fun. Next up, I want to kind of show you how we can select multiple things on this page. I want to show you the syntax and the way these selectors work. So let's get started. We are going to keep this H1 for now, but we're going to also add a few different elements. I want to add a p tag here. There's going to be some random text like this. Actually, let's just keep it short here. I don't need anything too crazy. Actually, let's just add a H3 because that's a bit easier to see. This is going to say, Mom is cooking the good stuff, like that. And I also want to duplicate this a few times because I want to show you a few things. So we have this 3 more times, and let's also add maybe an anchor tag here. If I add this, hold on, let me change my language again. If I add this hashtag here, it just basically means that this link is not taking me anywhere. So here I'm just gonna say, this is a empty link. Okay, I just want to have a few things here so we can start styling. Okay, I'm gonna add a class to this. I'm gonna say, let's name it first title, like this. Okay, and on the anchor tag, I want to say ID. We're gonna throw an ID on this, and the ID on this is gonna be YouTube link, like this. Okay, and we're gonna hit save. So when we go to CSS here, all we have to do to select something is write the name of the element. So that's one way we can do it. H3. All right, so we write H3, the name of the element we want to pick, and then we do these curly braces. Okay, the squiggly, wormy, curly brace. I sometimes forget, in case I say squiggly worms, that just means curly braces. Okay, so we just open it up like this, and all these styles that we add will be in here. So everything that I want to add to this H3, this header tree, will be inside here. So let's do the color, because we did the color. And we can choose a color like this if we want, and hit save. And as you can see here, the syntax is kind of like the same that we did inside here when we styled it with the attribute. It's just you say color or the name of the property you want to attach, and then you do colon, you say the name, and then you end with a semicolon. Okay, so now we can add more things in here if we want. Now, you don't necessarily need these names. You can also color pick, choose one with RGB, like this. So VS Code has this awesome thing. So yeah, that's very cool. Let's go down here, something that we can see a bit easier, maybe a bit darker. We can use RGB, and we can also use hex, like this. I don't know what this hex means, but it's probably not the color. But anyway, let's get rid of that. So as you can see, we can add it like this. So when we use it like this, we just say H3. Well, all the H3s on our page are gonna get this style. So as you can see, everything in here gets the style. All right, but what if I wanna do something specific? So maybe I want this H3 here, the first one. Well, we can do that by just using the class. So I can say first title. All right, I'm targeting directly this element. This is the only thing I want to style. So rather than doing it like this, I can just get that class. And by the way you can get classes in your CSS is you just add a dot. Okay, just a dot, and then you say first title, I believe it was, and then the same syntax applied with the curly worms, and you just write your color red. Hit save, and now take a look. Only the first one gets changed. So when you're applying it like that, when you're getting one specific element, because this is the only one that has a class on top of it, well, this is the only one that's gonna get it, okay? So this is how the syntax works. Let's also check out the one with the ID, and the way you can select an ID is by adding this hashtag, okay? And by doing this hashtag, you can just do YouTube link again, and that's gonna work just fine. So we can change the color of this to black, because the default is gonna be that bluish color. So there we go. Everything works fine. And the next video, we're gonna get more specifically into the specificity, how we can select specific elements, what we can do with specific elements, the importance of class and ID, how does it prioritize what style it's gonna get, and things of that sort. So this is just kind of the syntax on how you can select elements. You have three. So you have selecting the element directly, you can do it with a class, or this is how it looks like with the ID. Okay, so let's get into specificity and some more tips and tricks. Okay, so before I get into the specificity of like what's more important, class or the normal selector, or with ID, like how does CSS know what to apply where? Before we get into it, I kind of want to show you a few selectors that are very commonly used. So I added a bit of text here. I just added one H1, a paragraph here. These are not contained in anything. Okay, they're just general here. This is just for example purposes. We have a section here. Here I did add a H1 and a P tag. Then we have a section here that has a class on it, and then a H1 with a UL and an LI. Okay, so the first one we saw is just selecting H1 like this. Now the problem with this is that sometimes we just want to style one H1, all right, maybe just this one. But if we just select it generally like this, we just say H1, then basically what CSS is going to be like is, oh, okay, I'm going to look at all the H1s on your page. So it's going to look at everything, it's going to analyze it. Oh, there's a H1, okay, so I'm going to style that. Hey, this H1 and this H1, okay? So if we add a color of red here, I don't like red, I want cornflakes blue. Oh, it's cornflower, okay, never mind. So it just styles all the H1s, okay? This is a very, very general selector. Sometimes you might want to do this, but a lot of times you might want something specific. These are generally good, again, when you want to style all the H1s in one specific way. That can work, or maybe you want your paragraphs to look in one specific way, so all of them, then this is fine. The general selector can be very good. Other times you want to do something more specific. So how can I select this if I just want this to be selected on its own? Well, I can either add a class on it, or I can add an ID on it, okay? Depending how important and unique this is. If it's something very unique, like a logo, then I'm gonna add an ID. If it's something more basic, then I can add a class if I just wanna select it for the sake of selecting it and styling it. But sometimes you might have one here, like in this section, and this section might also might have a class on it, I apologize, but not necessarily. But for this one, let's just add a class of, this is just a random section, okay? Let's name it a random section that we might have on the page. Sometimes when you might just have one here and you want to select it, you can actually access that with the section. So take a look. I can actually chain together multiple words here. I can say, I want to get that random section, and in that random section, I want to style the H1s. Okay, so I just write the class and H1. Okay, so the way CSS looks at this is, okay, let me get all the H1s. It looks at all the H1s, and then it's going to be like, okay, but only the H1s in the random class. So now if we add a color to this, let's do dark magenta, then it's only going to style that one. As you can see, only this one gets styled because it takes a look at the random class and only the H1s in the random class. Now, obviously, if you have more H1s in this random class, it is going to apply to it. Sometimes you might want that, sometimes you might not. It kind of depends. Sometimes you might have divs wrapped around these like this to avoid running into that issue, and then you might have multiple H1s here. Then you would select the div and the H1, or you might have a class specifically added to this. So main title maybe or something, and then you could select main title H1. So it kind of depends on how your HTML looks like. So you're gonna get most of the experience out of this when we're actually building out some projects. Okay, but those are a few ones. Another selector that I want to show you, and that is the star selector. And all this does is it basically selects everything on your page. So I'm going to show you a new property here, which is called font-size. This just changes the font size of everything that you have on the page. So if I go something like 20 here, 20 pixels, it's going to change every element to 20 pixels. So it looks at everything. H1P section, I don't care, I'm changing everything. So this is the star selector. This is greatly used if you maybe want to get rid of some basic styling that is usually provided on elements. So as you can see, the spaces that the H1 has and the paragraphs and things of that sort, sometimes you might want to just get rid of everything because every browser kind of behaves differently. So what you would do is you would remove all these spaces and everything, and then you would add it on your own where you want, just to have a bit more control. So this can be used greatly, and is used actually in almost all projects. Let me show you two more selectors that you might encounter. One is maybe sometimes you want to target, on this H1 I added the class of my list. Sometimes you want to target something that's below it. So in this case, if maybe I have the H1 selected, I can target something below it, like this UL. The way I can target something below is by adding a plus symbol. So I can get the my list, I can get that H1, and if I add a plus, I can select that UL below it, okay? And then here, let's introduce a new one. Maybe I want to get rid of the style on those dots on the unordered list. We can add a list style, whoops, and we can say none and hit save. And as you can see, that gets rid of that. So anytime you want to target something below, you can have the element above selected and you can target it with the plus. In this case, H1, you need to add H1 plus P and it would select this P tag, okay? Another way we can select elements is maybe I have this list here and maybe I don't have a class on it or anything. And maybe I have another list out here. Maybe I just have some lists laying here. I mean, normally you wouldn't have this anyway, probably just lists laying here, but you might have it on a different side of your page. So what we can do is I can select the lists that are specific to a UL. Okay, so I know that I just want to select the lists that belong specifically to a UL. So what we can do is we can say we can say UL that has lists in it like this. And if I change the color of this to, let's do, what shall we do? Fuchsia. Hit save. As you can see, it only changes the LIs that belong to a parent that's the UL. So whatever is the parent, so the big element that holds all of these small LIs, are the only elements that are going to be applied to. So like this. Now, again, this, you might probably also have it in a UL to be semantically correct. So this wouldn't work. But what you might have is a class on top here. So let's say this is my navigation or something, nav links like this. You can also add a class here. So you can combine these with classes, IDs. So everything I'm showing you here, you can add classes and IDs as well. All of these symbols. So here I can get rid of this UL and I just say that, hey, every LI that belongs to this specific class, to this nav links like this. And as you can see now, this only changes. But make sure when you're using this symbol, it only applies to when your parent is nav links. So only the LIs that have a parent of nav links. So make sure you just look outside. So here are the nav links. Oh, what's my parent? Well, the thing that wraps me, which is nav links. In this case, oh, okay, what is my parent? Well, just this UL. It doesn't have that class of nav links. So obviously it's not going to be applied. In the other case, when we didn't have the class, well, it was the same. Oh, the parent is the UL. Perfect, I'm going to apply the styles. Oh, the parent is UL, I'm going to apply the styles. But here it's a bit more specific. But sometimes this is kind of redundant and you might not want to do this. Since you have a class already on top of it, you can just get this by saying nav links li and you're going to be just as fine. So there's different ways of selecting elements and there's no one specific right way of doing it. You have a lot of choices here that you can mess around. So yeah, it's just about messing around with it and trying to figure out what would be the best choice without even like overblowing and adding a class to everything, right? Sometimes it's enough to just add it to a parent element and you can drill down using the selectors by saying elements, using the element and then, or maybe having a random class and then saying li. Sometimes that might be fine and it might be just enough to do it. Okay, but technically you can chain together as many as you want. Imagine that we can have an li and then we might have an a in here. So an anchor tag that's going to link us somewhere. Let me just drop this here in real quick. We're going to add a hashtag to quickly get rid. Let me switch the keyboard. There we go. So you might have a anchor tag here. So to access that, you would need to drill down. You would need to go from UL to LI to A. So we can do that like this. Let's select the class. I forgot. My memory is very short today. Nav links. So we can get that nav links like this. LIA. So this works just as fine to color black. Okay, hit save, boom, it got rid of it, right? But sometimes, again, this is if you want to go all the way down and be very specific. If you have only this anchor tag here, you can even get rid of this li, because there's no real reason we should add this li in here, because what this specificity means is, what the selector means is, I should go to the nav links, which is here, and then take a look inside the li's, modify only the anchor tags, because if I have another anchor tag in here, let's say hello. If we have another anchor tag in here, as you can see, it doesn't modify it. Why? Because I selected it specifically. I said nav links, only the A tags inside the li. Okay? So by doing that, only this one is going to be black and this one stays blue. If I want both of these blue, then I would have to get rid of this li. So boom, there we go. Now both are dark. Perfect. So those are a few ones. We can also select elements by their number, by their where they are positioned inside a group here. So I'm gonna clean this up a bit to make this a bit more simple to read. So let's get rid of everything. I'm just gonna get a UL here, and I'm gonna add a few LIs. LI, hello, and then we're gonna duplicate these a few more times, okay? So the way we can do this, I'm gonna add a class of links in here. We can get rid of everything. We can select those links like this. Again, if we add a style here, color red, it's basically gonna apply everything. So if you add just a color red to this or something, it's gonna apply the color red to everything that you have inside here. Okay, but maybe I wanna do something specifically to only one. So what we can do is, with this links, so the class, the big UL that we have, we can select a specific number in here, right? So on the position, that's what I'm trying to say. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? The numbers of the elements and their positions inside this UL. So the way we can do that, if I want to select one specific one, we can say links like this, and then we can add a colon like this and say end child, all right? And here we can provide the number. If I want the first element inside this links, I can say 1, and then I can say color red. I don't like this red. I need to change it. It's so awful. Blue. God bless. Okay, there we go. So if I say ends child 1, so if I say ends child 1, as you can see, everything gets turned into blue. Well, why is that happening? Well, we need to add specifically what element we want to target, because right now we just say, hey, the links ends child 1, which is only one. We only have one class of links. So what I need to say here is, in the links, the li, the first li with the ends child. Okay, so let me change the color of this because it's, again, hard to see. So as you can see, I need to write the class that we want to take a look at, and then the li, and which li in this list of groups. Well, the first one, so ends child 1. If I want the third one, I just write 3. And let me make this clear why that happened. So if I go back here, this happened. As you can see, nothing applies now, but if I say 1, it applies. And the reason why this is happening is because we only have one class of links. So it takes a look here and adds that color to everything basically that we have in this links. But if we have 2 of these, then take a look. If I do 2, it only applies to this one. If I do 1, it only applies to this class. So we strictly looked at the classes, the links class, when it came to the ends child, and not the li or something else more specific, okay? So that's why when we added 1, it just applied the color to the whole thing, because it was like, okay, well, I just apply. You can read it like this: links, color, blue. That's basically what happened because we had 1. So this had no effect on it. But if we have multiple ones like this, like 1 and 2 links, then you can specifically select 1 or 2 of these, all right? So let's get rid of this. We're only gonna keep this one, and let's change this back to li, and we are specifically selecting the second one. Okay, here is where we are going to understand CSS way more, how it works. My throat hurts a bit, so I apologize if you're not gonna hear me in a bit, but I need to take a break a bit after this one. But you're not gonna know that because, yeah, you can just watch the next video and it's like, oh, 3 days passed. Okay, anyways, let's move on. So I kept this as simple as possible. I just have a H1 here and a P tag. Okay, so take a look. If I select that H1 and I change that color to coral, okay, we have that nice coral color. What happens when we write H1 again here and we say color cornflower blue? Well, the color changes to cornflower blue. Why is this happening? Well, CSS works from up to down, okay? It reads the first one, it says, okay, H1 should be coral. And then goes, and gets to H1 again and says, okay, color should be cornflower blue. So the last style always gets applied. Okay, if we select the same thing, the one further down is the one gonna be applied. So if I write H1 again and change this again, it's gonna change. Cyan, okay? So it's cyan now, but if I move this up here, well, cornflake is gonna, cornflake? I keep saying cornflake. Cornflower blue is gonna be the one that's gonna be applied to, okay? However, okay, so we know that it goes from up to down and the last one gets selected. Okay, what happens if I add a class to this? I'm gonna say class of header, okay? And then we go in here and I just write header and we change the color to cornflower again, like this. Save, okay, that's blue. That's what we expected, right? Because we read it from up to down. But what happens if I move this up here? Well, is it gonna change to coral? No, it's still cornflower blue. Why is this happening? Well, the reason why this is happening is because the class has a bigger priority over the element selector. And a good way you can see this is just by hovering over the element. And you're gonna see that the selector specificity is 0, 0, 1, whereas this one is 0, 1, 0. So the one further on the left is gonna be more and more important. Okay, so this is 0, 0, 1. This is 0, 1, 0. So what is 1, 0, 0? Well, 1, 0, 0 is an ID. That's the most valuable one because it's the most unique one. So if I add an ID to this of head, I'm just gonna say head like this. If I say head and I apply a color of dark red, now this is gonna be the most important one. It doesn't matter where this is. It can stay here, it can stay here, it can stay here. It doesn't matter. This is the least important one, 0, 0, 1. This is secondary, 0, 1, 0. And this is the most important one, 1, 0, 0. However, this is mostly what you are gonna encounter. These three in here. But there are certain cases where you might have a style on the element. If you have a style on this element, so I'm gonna say style, color, and I'm just gonna say black and hit enter. This, you can imagine it as this having a greater priority over everything that you have here in CSS, okay? It's more important than everything you have, whether it's H1, whether it's a class, whether it's an ID. As soon as you have the style directly applied to the H1, that's gonna win. However, there's one more. Oh my goodness, what did they do there? They smoked something, probably. But there's one more. If you have no idea how to change a style and you cannot find in your code what's happening, what you can do on whichever element you want, you can add a exclamation point important like this. And this is basically gonna override everything. This is like the last solution. This is not good to do. You don't want to add this important usually, almost never. But this overrides everything. So it doesn't matter. This is kind of like a fifth level of specificity. that you can add important. But generally, what you're going to be sticking to is h1 class and this one. Okay, you're never going to use this important. Okay, so let's remove this. You're better off trying to figure out why this important is not working, right? Because the problem here is, if later on, let's say later on we're gonna work on something and I want to change something about that h1. I want to change the color to maybe a dark slate blue and it's not working. Okay, I'm gonna select it like this with a header, not working. So you're gonna mess around and try all of these different selectors and you cannot get this to change. So again, to override this again, you're gonna have to say important here. So it's gonna override the one on top because again, we are reading it from top to bottom. So it gets really messy. So try to ignore this, try to ignore styling it with important and also ignore styling it in the H1 here. The only ones you should be sticking to are normal selector like this, class and ID, and that's gonna make everything super clear on which is how important. Okay, even if you have multiple classes, the one that's below is still the one that's gonna apply. However, we can also select elements. I'm gonna show you a new one that we haven't covered so far. What if I do H1 active like this? So basically I want to select only the classes that are H1. So now if I say color deep pink, wow, that's a new one, deep pink, it changes and I can even move it up here. Why is that? Well, if we take a look again, 0, 1, 0, the one in the middle is the class, so that gets 1 point. However, here we also have the element. So 0, 1, 1, right? The first 0 being ID, the second 0 being the class, and the third one being the element. So here we define specifically that I want to select the H1 specifically that have a class of active. So it's a bit more specific than just throwing out a random class because, hey, we can have this active class technically on anything we want. I can add the active on here. Class active, okay? So I can have the same thing, but that doesn't mean that I want to apply that deeping to it. So this is more specific. Okay, margins and paddings. What are these things and why are they so important? Well, we're going to use these a ton. So I really want to cover this so you understand everything. Okay, so we talked about how the browser basically put some default styles already on our elements. And we saw that there's this big space with the heading 1 here. So look at the space between this and the button. And the way we can look at that is if we tap F12 in the browser, and then if we go over to this tool here, click it, and if we hover over, or optionally you can just go down here to the elements, and if I hover over, you're going to see that there's the element which has a blue color to it, and then there's an orange color that has that space. So that orange color is actually the margin, okay? And as you can see, it just gives space between the elements. And if we go down to the button, now this is kind of hard to see, so let me zoom in. You're going to see that there is a green one as well besides the orange one. So what is that? That's weird. All right, well, let's see. The green one is the padding, but why and how is that any different than the margin? Okay, let's take a look at the difference. So I'm going to zoom a bit back out, but I'm still going to be zoomed in so you guys can see. Okay, so here it is. Let's actually see how we can add a margin and padding. So let's just get the button here, okay? And if I add a margin, I just write margin, and I'm going to say 100 pixels. So that's going to add 100 pixels of margin. Hit save. As you can see, it actually applies the margin everywhere, top, left, bottom, and right. Okay, so if you just say it like this, margin 100, that's going to add space up, left, bottom, and right everywhere. All right, if we change this to 50, you can see that as well. If we check here, you're going to see that that orange grew a ton. Okay, so that's cool. But what happens if we add a padding? So if I add a padding of 50 pixels, that's going to grow the element, but it's going to be the inner space, as you can see. So if we take a look again, as you can see, the element itself grew. Okay, so that's the difference between padding and margin. The margin is going to be on the outside of the element, and the padding is going to be on the inside of the element. Now, if we do this on the H1, it might be hard to see. As you can see, it kind of looks the same as margin. So if I change this to margin 2, it looks identical. However, this gets changed a bit as soon as we start adding a background color. So take a look. On the padding, if I add a background color of crimson, as you can see, this is the size of the element. And if we click on this button, you're going to see that if I hover over the H1, look how large this H1 got. Okay, this is going to be the inside space. However, if I change this to the margin, then the element itself is going to stay the same size and it's just going to add the spacing outside. Okay, so let's take a look, and there we go. Look at that, that just gives the empty space. So that's all you have to remember. Margin is going to add the space outside and the padding is going to be on the inside. Okay, that's the only difference. Now let's see different ways that we can add paddings and margins. I apologize. So this is the first way we saw. If we just add 50 pixels like this, and that's going to apply it everywhere on each side. However, if I add another value here, let's actually do this on the button because it's going to be a bit easier to see. Button, hit save, and what I'm gonna do is change this to padding, just because it's going to be a bit easier to visualize. Okay, so we have 50, 50, 50, 50. If I add another value here, let's say 20 pixels, then what's going to happen is as soon as you have two values, the first value is going to be applied to top and bottom, and the second value is going to be applied to left and right. So here we have 50 on top, 50 on bottom, and here we have 20 on left and 20 on right. If I want to add custom on all four, then I can add two more values. I can say 10 pixels and 5 pixels. So what happens here is we count clockwise from up here all the way around. So the first one, 50 pixels, is going to be top. The second one, 20 pixels, is going to be right. So there's 20 pixel space here. The third one is going to be 10 pixels here on the bottom and 5 pixels here on the left. So if I say 0 pixels here, there's not going to be any additional space. As you can see, the button hits the corner perfectly there. So you just count from top all the way around, and that's how you can add it. So this is actually a very simple way of doing it. You need to wrap your head around it a bit. You need to drink your coffee first in the morning, and then it's gonna click with you more. But there's another way you can do this, is by actually typing it out like this: padding top, and then you can add 20 pixels, or padding left and right and bottom and all the other ones. You can type them out like this individually too, but this is a bit more. Let me change this so it kind of matches the one up here. 50, and then down here left is gonna, let's do right, is 20, and then we have on the bottom we have 10, and then padding left is gonna be 0. Okay, so take a look. This should technically override this up here. So if I remove this, it's going to be the same thing, as you can see. Okay, if I change this to 100, now this is going to change. But take a look at how much code we write here and how much code we write here. So I highly recommend you to practice with this. And in case you don't need a property, maybe I just want to add 50. Maybe I just want to add 50 top, right I want 0, and bottom I want 0. I can just change these to 0 like this, and it's still gonna work the same way, as you can see. Oh, never mind, I messed something up. So let's take a look again. 50 top, okay, that's good. All right, so here it would be 0 because we have 0 here and here 0, and that should work fine. But in this case, if we only have one, then it's fine to just use padding top if you just only want to add it to one side. But generally, you're going to see that you're going to use a lot of either one value or with two values. So either adding it everywhere or adding top, bottom, and left and right. So this top, bottom, and now it's left and right. Okay, so it's gonna take a bit of practice, but it's okay because we're gonna get a ton of it with these paddings and these margins. So as you can see again now, if I just have two values, the first one is gonna be top and bottom 50, and on the left and right it's gonna be 0. Okay, so it's not that complicated, it's quite simple. All you have to remember is that margins are going to be on the outside of the element, are going to add spacing on the outside, and paddings are going to be added on the inside of the element. Okay, perfect. Next up, we are going to use we're going to explain the box model. Tum tum tum. What's a box model? Well, you will find out in the next episode, so stay tuned. Okay, let's cover the box model. Sounds so fancy, but it's not. This is something that you might not use per se, but it's very important to know about. So all a box model is, again, I just have a div here with a h2ap and a button. All a box model is, if we grab this tool and we hover over all of these elements, you're gonna see that you're inside a rectangle or some sort of box. And even this, even the p tag, even the button has some sort of outline with like orange and different colors sometimes. As you can see on this button, if I zoom in, it has even green and everything. So what is that? Well, if we take a look, let's say on this text, here is the box model. The blue part of the box model is the element itself, so the text in this case, right? Padding, it doesn't have any padding, and neither does it have a border. However, it does have a margin, so take a look. Okay, let's take a look at the button. The button has the border, which is that yellow, it has the green, which is the padding, and the blue, which is the text. So that's basically the box model. All of these different properties bunched up together makes the box model. The paddings, the margins, the borders, and the element itself. Okay, now how is this useful, or why is this useful? Well, it's just good to know about because, let me show you. If I go to CSS and I just grab a div here, and maybe I just want to add a background color, or maybe I have multiple cards here. So let me kind of duplicate these a few times like this. All right, I'm gonna hit save, and imagine like we have some sort of card system. Now we haven't talked about how we can position these elements kind of the way we want, but we're gonna cover that in just a bit. So let's just add a background color to this. Let's go nice. I want something beautiful. This is not gorgeous. A bluish, I love the bluish colors. And let's also add a color of white so we can kind of see the text inside there. Okay, perfect. So we have this. Okay, now what if I add and change the width of this? So maybe I just add a width of around, let's do 300 pixels, okay? So it's this size, perfect. Okay, what happens if I add a padding to this? So I want to add a padding of 20 pixels to this. Well, oh, okay, hold on, the thing grew. The thing grew a lot. And sometimes this can be problematic because we might add paddings and margins in different places. Sometimes it might look good, but the problem is that the amount of pixels that our original box had has changed. So if we take a look on the div now, if we go over to the computed section here, you're gonna see that, all right, let's see, where can we see? The size, basically what I'm trying to tell you is that, look at this, the size of the div grew. So as you can see, it's 340 by 163 pixels. So that means that the padding that was added actually grew the element itself. So now our whole box is way bigger than we intended. And sometimes we might want to have some fixed amount of sizes for these things. And this might cause a lot of problem because I might calculate something that should be around 300 pixels, but if I add some padding to it, it's gonna grow. So as you can see, if I'll make something more dramatic for you, if I add something like 50 here, you're gonna see that it grows a lot. And let me just add the top bottom actually, like this. Let me add pixels here. So as you can see, if I increase the size, it keeps growing a ton. And I don't want that, I just wanna have this width precise here, okay? And we can also do this by, take a look, I'll give you another example. Maybe I add a width of 100%, like this, okay? Perfect. Let me close this up. But take a look. If I add a padding of 20 pixels, or actually we also had the margin, look, my scroll bar appeared. I don't want this to happen. I might just want to add some padding so the text is not stuck there like this. As you can see, it's stuck there. So I want to just add some padding. But now the element grew. So of course it's like 100% plus 20 padding, all right? So that's why we can scroll this way. So there is a good fix for this, and I highly recommend you to do this. What we're gonna do is we're gonna grab all elements and we're gonna remove all the basic stylings. So the body has some styling on it with margins, as you can see, and the H1 as well. So first of all, I want to get rid of those issues. By adding margin 0, as you can see, now we don't have those empty weird lines. Okay, so that's step number 1. Okay, let's also add a margin 20 to this, just so it's a bit more spacey. Let's just do top, margin top. I'm gonna do 20 pixels, okay? All right, there we go. That's what I want to have. Okay, we can still scroll because the padding affects it. And now what I want to do is also remove additional paddings from all the elements. Just because the reason why I'm doing this is because I don't want the box model and the elements itself to control how I design my things. I want to start from scratch and I want to add it myself. But here's the property that's going to change everything. We're going to say box sizing border box. And as you can see, now we cannot scroll anymore because everything that we add, all the paddings, all the borders that we add to our elements now are going to be contained within. So if we check right now, as you can see, the padding is going to be on the inside, just like that. If I remove this, take a look. If I remove this, then we can scroll again. And that's not what we want. But if we add this back, now we cannot, because take a look, the element size stays the same. So another way I can illustrate this is if I add a width of something very large. So let's do a width of 300 pixels. All right, 300 pixels, there we go. I cannot see this, but it's okay. So let's take a look at the size of this. If I close this up, oh, never mind, I messed it up. I didn't close this. There we go. Now our element is 300 pixels long, exactly how I want. Even with the padding, it's not going to be a problem. But when I start removing this box size, as you can see, it grew a bit and now it's 340. So that's a simple example that I wanted to show you that can mess it up, like the scroll thing, where you might add some paddings and then you're like, why can't I scroll on my website? Or why is my CSS behaving the way it is? It's because the box sizing is set by default on content box, all right? And this can give us trouble because it's going to set the padding and everything and the borders on the outside. So I'll show you again. I'll show you another property with border. We can add a border of 3 pixels. The second property is going to be solid and we're going to say black. Okay, so there we go. And now let's increase the size by 10. So as you can see, it keeps getting added on the inside. There we go. But if we go back to 5 pixels and we start removing this border box, hit save, let's start increasing this. Oh no. Okay, that's too large. Let's do 50. Oh, look at that. Oh no, we are overflowing and everything is growing. So that's basically border box. Just make sure whenever you are starting out your website or anything, just add margin 0, padding 0, and add that box sizing border box because it's gonna save you a ton of issues. Okay, I promise you we are almost done with the boring stuff, and in just a bit we are gonna experiment with some more fun things you can do in CSS, such as adding images and backgrounds and creating some cool styles with some cool properties. But there are a few essential things that we still have to get through, unfortunately, but it's gonna greatly help you and make you understand what's really going on, because you're gonna have some certain cases where you're gonna be confused and you're not sure why your CSS is behaving the way it is. And these are some things that, again, we just have to go through. And one of them is the sizes of pixels and ems and rems. So these units, what are these units and how are they behaving? So let me quickly show you an example here. We have a section here. I just gave it a class of text section because it has only a paragraph, but I also created a div here with another paragraph. Okay, so typically we've seen pixels, and that's like most common. Pixels are everywhere. When they get the new iPhone gets announced, they tell you how many pixels per inch they have. So everybody knows pixels. So let's take that class and let me kind of show you something. Let's put the class here. Oops, there we go. Okay, so if I set a font size of this to 20 pixels, well, everything is going to be 20 pixels. So all the paragraphs are going to have 20 pixels, and we can take a look at that if we open up with F12, this developer tools, and we click on one of these paragraphs. As you can see here, it says font size is 20 pixels. Okay, very cool. Now, the interesting thing is I can go maybe inside this div and set this paragraph as well. Okay, so we can say text section div, so we can get this div, and I can say font size of 30 pixels in here. So that grows this to 30 pixels. Okay, well, cool. As you can see, okay, well, we have 30 now here. Okay, so what's the problem with this? Well, there are a few problems with this, even though this might seem super simple. The problem is that accessibility-wise, this might be that ideal. And I want to quickly show you this here, even though I have an accessibility section coming up later in the course. This pixel that is set here is fixed. It cannot be modified. It's set in stone. So maybe if a user wants to change the size of their font in the browser because they might not see your text very well, maybe this text, they cannot see it very well. Well, if they go to settings here and they want to change the font size, which I'm not sure where it is, it's here, font size. If I change this to small maybe, well, nothing changes. Very small. Oops. Very big. As you can see, nothing gets affected, and that can be a problem. And especially for people who use different font sizes, and they might want to have the text very easy to read. I need one for speaking too because I cannot speak. So accessibility wise, pixels is not that great of an idea. Also, it's not a great idea for responsive design because you have a fixed set of value here. You have 20 and 30. So maybe if we go on mobile, so if we go smaller like this, we have to do some tricks to change each and every value to match a mobile screen font. So we might have to modify this section and this section to get the results we want. Again, we're gonna get into that in later a bit when we cover media queries, which basically just allows you to change all your elements based on the size of the screen. So basically when you go to mobile, you can change the font sizes, you can change the styles, the colors, and everything else. So pixels make it a bit tricky because you have to keep changing them because they're fixed. So another alternative that we have is ems. So ems units are written like this. Let me quickly show you. Let's get rid of everything. I'm gonna say font size 1em. All right, hit save. And by default, that's gonna be 16 pixels. And there is actually a secret little bastard here that we don't know, but HTML sets the pixel size, and HTML, by the way, is the root element of our website here. So this one, it gets set by default to a font size of 16 pixels, okay? We cannot see this, but this is happening kind of behind the scenes. And as you can see, if I save it, nothing really changes. So I'm gonna comment this out, and I didn't show you how you can comment things out in CSS, so let me show you now. You just basically add a slash and a a star sign, and everything you wrap inside this slash star sign and then star sign slash basically doesn't get executed in your code. Okay, so if I want to wrap this, the code is not gonna work anymore. So take a look. Okay, but this is actually the default. So if I change this to something like 10, nothing happens. Okay, so let's go back, let's get rid of this. All right, so it's 16 pixels, very cool. So if I want something like 24, I can set it to 1.5, right? And then we get 25 pixels, there we go. Okay, now the cool thing is, if I did that calculation correct, you do 16 times 1.5 and then you get, excuse myself, excuse me. All right, okay, we good, it's 24, it's 24. Okay, so basically you multiply everything by the element that you have, so the parent element. So M's basically take a look at the parent element, but I want to show you where it gets a bit tricky. If I go here and I want to say, maybe I want to have a font size and I'm going to say 1.5. Okay, it's going to be the same font size, this one, which is kind of useless to add, to be honest, because we already defined it up here, but I just want to show you the difference. Okay, so basically I'm going to add it to this p tag, so in the div and this p tag. If I add a 1.5 m, well, why is this bigger now? What m does is it takes a look at the parent element. So it takes a look at the parent element and it multiplies it. And then this parent element takes a look at its parent element and then multiplies it. So take a look what happens. We added 1.5 m to this, and it's gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna multiply it by my parent element's font size. So it's gonna take a look at the section and it's gonna be like, oh, you're 1.5. Okay, 1.5 times 1.5 times what's the parent of this element? It's the body. And what's the body's parent? It's HTML, which has the default size of 16. So this is what is basically happening. You add 16 times 1.5 because it looks at the root element. And then down here it adds 16 times 1.5, so the parent, and then this element that we gave it here, okay? Now, check this out. This is kind of interesting. What if we add a margin top to this div? Let's add 1m. All right, how is that calculated? Well, let's look at the div. As you can see, the font size is 36 pixels and the margin top is 36 pixels. But what happens if I change this again to something like 2m? Well, then it's 72. So now you have to say 16 times 1.5 times 1.5 times 2. All right, so hopefully this is getting clear. You just keep adding more and more and you're duplicating more. So now it takes into consideration this, and this times this. All right, so wherever you have defined a font size, you're gonna have to keep multiplying. And this can get quite crazy. And as you can see, it makes things not fun, okay? I never use this, by the way, so you can catch a breath right now, you can sit back, you can watch this, enjoy it, and knowing that you're almost never gonna use this. But I wanna make it even weirder for you. If you wanna break this, you can just add a font size. If you set a pixel font size, then it doesn't inherit it anymore, okay? But if we change this to a font size like this, and then we add an M unit, so margin top, let's do 2 M's again. Now it's gonna inherit only this one. We're not gonna be doing the multiplications anymore because if we set a pixel here, it's gonna destroy that inheritance. It's not gonna take a look anymore at the parent div and the parent of the parents div. So now it just looks at, okay, it's 20 pixel times 2, okay? Oh my goodness, this is so confusing. Okay, don't worry, because we have a new unit here to the rescue. We have something called rem. And the only difference between the rem and the m is that we are not gonna inherit from parent to parent to parent. We are only gonna inherit from one single one, which is the root parent, which is this HTML element. So when we set a rem, it's only going to take a look at this HTML font size. Okay, so let me show you how this clears everything up so simply. We can go to the text section, and maybe I want this to have 16 pixels. So I can set a font size of 1 rem. If I hit enter, we can take a look. This has 16. So if I want 24, I put 1.5. Okay, so now it's 24. Okay, but maybe on this one, I want to change it to something bigger. Or maybe accidentally I put it the same size, 1.5 rem. It doesn't matter because this one exclusively looks at the HTML and this one still exclusively looks at the HTML. So only at the root. We don't have to worry about taking a look where this thing is nested. Where is it here? Is it there? It doesn't matter. You're always gonna know that whatever rem you put here is always gonna be relative to the font size of the HTML, which makes it actually super easy. You know why? Because we can modify this HTML. So if I remove this HTML, I can set a specific font size here so that this rem calculation is going to be easier, because right now 1.5 rem is kind of tricky to calculate, right? You have to say, okay, so what's 16 times 1.5? So that can get a bit annoying. So what we can do is set a percentage here, which is 62.5, I believe 5%, like this, which is going to give us exactly, 1 rem is going to be exactly 10 pixels, as you can see here. 1.5 is exactly going to be 15 pixels. So this way we can style everything the way we want. I can come here, if I want this to be 16 pixels, I can just say 1.6 rem, boom, we have 16. Maybe on this div I want 24, I can say 2.4 rem. Boom, everything is the way I want. There's no weird things happening with inheritance. Nothing is going crazy. And the best part is I still have my accessibility here. So if I want to change the font size of this to something bigger, like large, it's going to affect it. It's going to work perfectly fine, very small. As you can see, things work perfectly. And this is going to be extremely easy to also make the text responsive. So when we resize the screen, we don't even have to add those media queries that we're going to see later on. We can just mess around with these in a specific way. Again, when we're going to get to the media responsive websites, we can make this responsive very easily. Okay, so highly recommend you to use rem. Highly recommend you to avoid pixels and ems. Ems might come into play, and even pixels, but very rarely. I really want you to put a heavy focus on using rems. So just set your HTML font size to 62.5, and that way it's very easy to add the numbers here, because 1 is going to be 10, so 1.5 is going to be 16, 2.4 is going to be 24. Okay, so those are rems, ems, and pixels. Wow, awesome. Okay, can we do some fun stuff now? I think the time has finally come for us to actually build out something nice for once. So let's look at borders, and we're gonna create a nice looking button for once, okay? So by default, if you're gonna put a button on the screen, let's say sign up, it's gonna look so ugly. Take a look at that. What is that? Get it off my screen, please. That looks terrible. Okay, so we're gonna take a look at a few properties that we can add to this to make it look very beautiful. So we can get the button here like this. And first of all, what I wanna do is make this a bit larger, all right? Because right now it doesn't look that good. Okay, so what we can do is we can add maybe some padding and some margin to this. So first of all, I want to just add some margin so it's not stuck up there in the corner. So let's do something like, let's do 10 rems, okay? And hit save. All right, so it's a bit kind of there. 20, okay, there we go. So we have the button positioned there. Perfect. So next, what I want to do is add some padding to this, because the button right now is kind of small. So the way we can do that is we can say padding. And we can add a padding of, let's experiment, top and bottom. I don't want it to be that high, so I want to say 2 rem. And on the left and right, let's try 4 rem. Okay, that looks way better. Perfect. Let me zoom in actually a bit. Actually, no, that's fine. Okay, so there we go. we have that. Now what I want to do is get rid of that background color because, oh my goodness, it's ugly. So the way we can get rid of it is we can say background color and we can say none. And as you can see, that doesn't work. So the one we actually need to use here is background. And when we hit save, it's going to get rid of it. Perfect. But we still have this ugly border on top. So to remove that, we can just say border and we can say none. And that's going to remove the border as well. However, if we want to have the border and we want to change it, here what we can do is we can add a size to it. So I can say 0.1 rem, and I can say, so this is the first property, the size. The second is going to be solid, which we're going to take a look at it in a bit. And the third one is going to be the color. So I can say blue and hit save. And as you can see, we have it right there. Now let's change this blue color to something. Let's also increase this a bit like that. And let's change this color. If we hover over it, sometimes it doesn't want to work. But let's get a nicer blue color, or like a purplish, something like that, a bit more vibrant. Let's add some color to this. Okay, perfect. So there we go. Okay, so this is the size, this is the color, but what is this? Well, solid makes the whole border full. There are a few other ones here that we can experiment, which is gonna be, and the cool thing that you can do is sometimes just type like this. And sometimes it can give you, sometimes it cannot. I believe when you first start typing like this, solid, let's see, all right. And then we have, I believe it only gives you the colors, unfortunately. But there's one called dotted, like this. And as you can see, that just adds dots to it. There's also ones that add lines to it, but generally, to be honest, you're rarely gonna use these. I mean, if you find some edge cases where you want to add dots to your buttons or just border dots for some reason, but it looks like something from the 90s. So I'm just going to keep it solid here. And mostly you're probably going to have solid borders anyways. Okay, so we added a border of solid here. Okay, next up, what I want to do is I want to change the color of this text as well. So we can say color, and we can say, we can actually just copy paste this color from up here. Save, and there we go. We can also adjust the font size a bit. Font size 1 rem. There we go. Oh, that's going to be 10. So let's do maybe 2.4. Is that going to be too large? No, that's going to be fine. So there we go. We have a nice looking button going on here. There's another property that I want to cover. Maybe you want to make these edges round a bit. You don't want this to be so boxy. So what we can do is add a border radius to this. And by adding a border radius, we can smooth this out and we can make it rounder. So if I add something like 1 rem, that's going to add 16 pixels of border radius to this. 10 pixels, I apologize. We have this HTML thing here that makes 1 rem 10 pixels. Okay, so there we go. That makes it look way, way nicer. If you want to add specifically maybe to the top left or bottom left a border radius, you can also do border. Let's do left, top left radius. All right, so this is going to be this one, top left, and you can add 2 rem here. So as you can see, that's going to make it even rounder for you. So there we go. So you can do top left, you can do top right, bottom left, bottom right. But this kind of adds it to all of it, which mostly this is what you're going to use anyway. If you want to make this perfectly round, what you can do is add 50%. So 50% is going to make it round. Now it's not round here because the element size also needs to be round. So this kind of looks rectangular right now, but what we need here is to have a perfect square for this to be round. So if I just set a height of 5 rem here and a width of 5 rem, I think we need a bit more. That's too small. So let's do 10 and 10. Is that too small? Let's do 20 and 20. All right, so there we go. So if the element is way larger here, and if we set the border radius to 50, then we are gonna get a perfect circle. Awesome. So let's remove these for now. And what I wanna do is also show you something else. So let's change this back. I believe we had 1 rem. We can also change this button if we want to make it full. We can add a background of this color that we had up here. So let's add this color up here. But now the problem is that the text is, okay, we cannot see the text. So we need to change this to white. So there are two, all right, not to color, to white. All right, so there's two different styles of buttons there for you if you want to experiment. But yeah, that's how you can create a simple, nice looking button. Let's take a look at display block, inline, and inline block. So many of them. All right, what are these things? So we have noticed that whenever we start adding like a header, for example, so we can say that, yeah, and hit save, we're gonna see that as soon as we hover over it, it's gonna take up the full width of our page here. Interesting. And the more interesting part is if we add another one and we're gonna say no, then this is gonna be dropped underneath. So some elements have a display type of block, which basically means that they're gonna take up the whole space here, the full width here, and they're gonna have a line break. So they're gonna drop the next element down below, okay? Now, if we get this H1 that we did, we can still add a height to it if we want. We can do, for example, like 2 rems to it. And let's take a look really quickly. Let's also add a background color to this. Background light gray. There we go, perfect. So let's increase the size of this because it was too small, 50. All right, so we can add some height to it if we want. That's perfectly fine. But there are a few elements that act a bit differently. So let me show you one. If I add an anchor tag down here below, and I'm gonna say link to my website. All right, hit save. So there we have. Let's copy this and add it again. Let's see what happens then. That's strange. The link is on the right. Why is this not on the bottom? So there are a few elements that are displayed differently. This is called displayed inline. And what it means is that it doesn't do a line break and it doesn't take up more space than the element itself. So if we add something else, another inline element, it's gonna be here, right next to it. And I can show you another one. We can do it with an image as well. That is an inline. So if we go back here, I'll just drop in an image of this green leafed, I'm not sure. If we go down here and I'm gonna add an image, let's add the source of green leafed. So, okay, this is here. And you know what, this is a bit still too large. So I'm gonna change the size of it to height, 100 pixels, and width. Why am I doing pixels? Let's do rems. Let's do 10 rems and width of 10 rems. Hit save. All right, so it's way smaller now. Okay, take a look. This one is here as well. And if I duplicate this again, as you can see, this is still coming next to it. Now, if it doesn't have any space anymore here, it's probably gonna jump down. So let's do it. And let's add another one. As you can see, it jumps down because it just doesn't have any space. Okay, let's remove it because I want to show you something else. So that's the first thing. The other interesting thing about these inlines is, let's take a look. Let's remove the image and add the anchor tag. So I want to add a background to this of light gray, okay? What if I want to add some height to this? Let's add a height of 10 rem. Hit save and oh, nothing happens. All right, let me try to add a width to this, 10 rem. Still nothing happens. Dun, dun, dun. What is this sorcery? Oh my goodness. Well, basically inline elements, you cannot add the height or width to them. It just doesn't work. It doesn't like it. It doesn't like it. Okay. What if we try to add some padding to them or some margin? Let's try margin 3 rem. Okay, margin works kind of in a weird way. So when you add margins to inline elements, only the left and the right property is gonna work. It's not gonna add on top or on bottom. Okay, so only left and right. So basically, all you need to remember is that inline respects left and right margins and paddings, but not top and bottom. All right, we cannot have a height or width. That doesn't work. It allows you to add other elements next to it, and that's kind of it. Okay, now there is one last one, a special one. We can add display, and by the way, we can change these if we want. Take a look. Let me remove everything here like this. And what I'm gonna do is add display block to the A text. Look, we just transformed them to display block. They take up the full width and they drop to a new line. So there we go. Now I can add a height to it. I can say 3 rem. And now take a look. If you wonder how you can align that to the center, you can add a text align center and it's gonna move it straight there. Nice, perfect. If you wonder what else you can do text align end, you can move it to the end, and start obviously is gonna move to the start. And there are a few other ones, but these are kind of the basic ones that we might use. Okay, perfect. So we moved it there. We can also move this down a bit if we want. We can add a bit of a padding top if we want. I don't know. Let's do like 1 rem. That should be fine. That looks okay. Okay, so this is what we have. We can modify it. And lastly, what I want to show you is maybe I do want to have these links one next to each other, and I do want to add some height and padding to them. So how can I do that? Let me remove everything again. So we start from scratch. Actually, I want that sexy background color. There we go. And this, I'm going to remove this so it's in line. We can change it to something called display inline block. And this is kind of like a combination of the two. But the difference is here with the inline block is that it respects the top and bottom margins and padding. And it also respects height and width. So if I try to add a height of 20 rem to this, I can do it. If I want to add a width of 20 rem, I can do that as well. Look at that, we have 2 boxes now. And I can also mess around with margin. If I add a margin of 2 rem here, it's going to jump it over because it doesn't have any space anymore. But as you can see, it does add it to the top and it does add it to the bottom as well. Take a look, the anchor tag has top and bottom. Same goes with padding. So if I drop a padding of 2 rem, that's going to work just fine. As you can see, the text moved here just because we have this box sizing border box. So it adds that padding on the inside so the element doesn't grow. We covered this in the last video because if you remove this, oh no, that's not what we want. So let's add that back. Okay. There is 2 more things that I want to cover before we start building out something, a super simple project here. Before we move on to the media queries and making mobile friendly things and then building out those 3 nice projects. So what I want to cover is positioning things. And let's go into our HTML here. What I did, I just added a div with a class and container and 3 boxes inside. So what I want to do is style them a bit. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get that container like this, container, perfect. And I'm just going to add a dark background color so we can see this. And I want to show you a few cool new tricks in CSS that we can do. So background, I'll just add a color like this and I'll change it afterwards. So as you can see right now, we cannot see anything. And the reason why we cannot see anything is because we don't have any content in our body. So if your content is empty, then you're not going to see any background color. As soon as we start adding something to it, so maybe I drop in a H1 here, you're going to see that background is going to appear. And the reason why this happens is because by default, we cannot see the HTML or the body, because as long as there's no content in it, the height is not going to be set. So we can change that. That's okay. So if we want to see something here, what we can do is we can add a width that we can see. So if I had 100% here, well, we still cannot see because we don't have any height. So the interesting thing is if I try to set a height to this of 100% to take up the full screen, we cannot see anything. And again, that's the reason why, because we have no content here and the body is set to, it doesn't have a height. So when you try to set a height of 100% of nothing, then nothing's gonna happen. So a quick fix for this is gonna be to take the HTML and the body and just add a height of 100% to it, and that's gonna stretch all the way down here. Okay, and now if I change the height of the container to something like 50%, then it's gonna take 50% of the height of the body. Now we're gonna look at a better solution than this when we get to responsive media with VH and VW. You're gonna see that. It's gonna be more fun. Okay, but for now we're gonna set it like this, which is completely fine. So I actually want this to be around, let's do 80%, and the width, let's also do 80% on the width. Okay, so something like that. Now what if I want to center this in the middle? There's a cool trick that you can do with margin. If we set margin to auto, it's automatically gonna allocate the space on the left side and on the right side. It's gonna split up the remaining width here, so 10% and 10%, and it's gonna drop it on the left and on the right. So whenever you want to take a div or a container or some sort and you want to position it in the middle, you can do a margin auto as long as your width is smaller than 100%, because if it's 100%, then it's going to take up the whole screen. Okay, so let's do something here with the boxes. I'm going to take box 1, box 2, and comma box 3, so I can select all of them and add a width to them. So I can do 20% and a height of 20%. Like this, and hit save. Okay, now if I go down here, I can add a background color to all of them. I can do background. Let's do something intense like this. Amazing. And what I can do now is just select box 2 and just change the background color. So the reason why I did this was so I don't duplicate these settings over and over again. So we change the background color there. Let's change it here as well. So let's do something like an intense blue. All right, these colors make me sad. I don't like the way they look. I want to make them obvious, but I don't want them to make your eyes hurt. So let's also take box 3 here and add a background. Let's try a green color. Not dark gray. Shall we do a dark one? Let's do a dark one. There we go. Let's do green. Poor green has, there we go, or like an ocean color, and the red can leave as well with a nice pink, purple. Okay, there we go. Some new colors there for you. So let's take a look at these positions. What are positions? How do we apply them? What do they do? Let's try it with the box. Let's try it with the box 1. Okay, the first one, the purple, lovely box. So what happens if I add, by default, all elements are positioned static, like this. And as you can see, it says the box is a normal box laid according to the normal flow. All right, so the way we basically added the elements in our HTML, that's the way they're positioned. So it's static. So if I add some content in here, if I add a H1, blah, 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 hit save. So they're just going with the normal flow of the HTML, okay? So nothing really special. However, if I change the position static, so as you can see, nothing happens, to position absolute, let's say absolute, what's gonna happen is that this element is gonna be ripped out of the normal document flow. You can think of it as we literally just take out the element and it doesn't care about where it is in the position anymore. So what happened, it's a bit hard to see, but as soon as we add this, these two get pushed up. All right, so it's kind of like this doesn't exist anymore. So it's kind of like we grab this out of here and these other boxes just get pushed up because it's like, oh, I have empty space. I shouldn't be down here. So they get pushed up. So if I hit save, this gets taken out and those elements get pushed up. And now we have access to 4 new properties called top, left, bottom, and right. And what happens if we add these? So let's try. What if I do bottom, 0 rem? Hit save. As you can see, it gets stuck at the bottom of the page here. Okay. What happens if I add left, 0? We can even say 0 pixels. That's fine. It gets stuck to the left here. Now, as you can see, these got pushed up here and it doesn't care about this box that it was in. You can imagine like it doesn't care about anything. It gets ripped out of the page and it just sits where you want it to sit. So 0 basically means here left 0, basically 0 pixels away from the left side of the screen here. So if I move this around, as you can see, it's 0. If I add some pixels here, or let's do one rem, it's gonna have 10 pixels from the left. If I want to push it up a bit, I can do 1 rem from the bottom. So there we go. So it's very easy to position this kind of the way you want. Maybe I want it top and kind of down here. So I can do top and right, hit save, and now it's here. And maybe I want to push it down. Let's do 20. There we go. So I can move this anywhere I want. What if I want to center this here? Well, we can also use percentages. Now something's weird is going to happen. So I'm going to add 50% and hit save. And as you can see, this doesn't look in the middle for some reason. And it actually is in the middle, but I want to explain this kind of how this works. So if we look from up here all the way down in the center here, what this is the center, this is where the element starts. So this is where it puts it. But right now the content, so the box, actually has some height to it and width to it, right? So 20%. So obviously it's gonna go a bit down, right? And it doesn't look centered. So what we want to do, it would be really cool if we would have a property that would take just this element, just this purple thing, take this and just move it up by half. So just the size of this, and take half of it and push it up. And there is actually a property that can do that, which is called translate, transform translate, okay? So let's do that, but before we do that, let's move the right one to 50% as well, 50%. We can use something called transform translate, all right? And you can move the X and the Y, or optionally you can do translate like this, and you can add 2 values. With translate X, you would add 1 value here, so like minus 50%, and with no value here, you can add 2 X and Y. So we can say X and Y, minus 50, minus 50, and as you can see, that's gonna move it perfectly in the center. So let me illustrate that translate even up here so it's a bit easier to see. If I add to the box to a transform, and let's just translate X, if I move this by 100%, then it's gonna perfectly move it the size of the box to the right, okay? If I wanna do the opposite way, I can say minus, and there we go. Also, what we did here was just do 50% because I wanted the element to be centered. So like this, as you can see, perfectly moved 50% to the left and upwards. So it's centered. Okay, let's get rid of this. And I want to show you something else. So this is how you can position it perfectly in the middle. You add top 50, left 50, and then you transform translate it back by minus 50 and minus 50. Okay, but what if I want this to be relative to the, all right, let me get rid of this. Let's just move this top to 0%. There we go. And let's move it to the right, 0%. What if I want this to be relative to the box? Okay, I don't want this to be out here. I want it to stick basically to this box. So to do that, all you have to do is, if you have a box 1 here, if you add position relative to the parent element or any parent you want to add, this is going to basically detect the first position relative you're going to add to a parent. So it can be either this one or this one. It's going to detect it the first time it hits position relative on an element. That's what it is going to stick to. So if I go here and add a position relative and hit save, as you can see now it constrains itself to the thing that we added relative. So you can imagine it as, okay, I have position absolute, but what am I relative to? Am I relative to this? And if it is, then you just add position relative. So now if I change this to top 0, as you can see it's there, I can modify this to bottom 0, and you're going to see that it's going to be stuck there perfectly fine. So now everything works the same way. It's just that everything is stuck in here. Okay. Now what position relative also does is if we go to box 2 here and add a position relative, all right, now this is not going to jump in there because it's not its parent, right? It's just going to look at parents. These are kind of siblings in here. So it's just going to look up there when you add the position absolute. But if you just add position relative to an element, all it's going to mean is that if we move this with top, left, right, and bottom, it's going to move away from this exact position. So it's going to keep account of where its initial position is. And then if we just add something like left 20 rem, all right, it's going to move 20 rem from its original position. Okay, so let me show you a 1 rem. So it's going to move left 1 rem from its original position. Okay, so that's very simple actually. Relative just moves from its original position. Okay, and the next one I want to show you is position static. Let's go to the dark box here. We're going to add position static. My apologies, position fixed, because static is the one it has. And what happens right now is we cannot really see anything. But if I go up here and I just change the body and the height to like 200, just so we can scroll a bit, as you can see, what happens is that this element stays fixed, all right? And I can scroll as much as I want and I can position it wherever I want. It's always gonna be fixed there. Now I can modify its position, its fixed position. So I can say top, let's do 2 rem and see what happens there. So it's here. Maybe I want to move it left 10 rem. And again, I can add percentages here just like the other ones. Let's do 5 rem. More? 10 rem you want? Oh, even more. This is not enough. 20 rem. Okay, so I can position it the way I want and I can scroll and it's always gonna stay there. Okay, and even if I go outside, it doesn't matter where I go, it's always gonna be fixed. Okay, so that is fixed. You might be using this if you have maybe some kind of chat or something, or maybe a footer or a nav that's always stuck up there. That's where you can use this. So maybe you have your content, but you have a nav. So we can even add height and width to this. So I can stretch this out with 100% if I want, hit save. All right, and then let's move the left to 0. So I'm gonna say 0%, like that. And top is gonna be 0%. And close this up. And there we go. You can imagine this as being your navigation and it's always there. Well, it wouldn't be so thick, but you get the general idea. Okay, so that's the one. Now there's another one I want to show you, which is called position sticky. So let's remove everything from here. And we are back to this. And let's change back the size to 100. All right. Actually, I need a bit more height here, so I'm going to add 200. Even though these are kind of stretched, we can kind of fix this if we want. If we go to the boxes and change the height to 10. Okay, just make them a bit shorter. But I want to have some scrollable space here. So if I go to the box tree and add a position sticky, hit save, nothing's going to happen. But as soon as I add top 0% and hit save, as soon as I start scrolling, as you can see, that black thing sticks there. But as soon as, that sounds weird, the black thing sticks there. But as soon as I move up, it kind of stops. So it gets sticky, and as soon as I move up, it's back to normal. So what this does, it switches from position relative to position fixed. So when we scroll down and it hits that top 0, so as soon as it hits that top 0, it's gonna stick there. All right. You can come up with some cool things here as well with this. And you can do the same thing with whenever it hits the bottom or the right or the left. Okay, so this works on all of those properties. So these are the positions. Now we're not going to be using this to exclusively align everything. So this is not how we're going to position the nav. This is not how we're going to position like the section and everything. These can be used sometimes for very specific purposes that we're going to cover when we're going to get into building out the project. That's where you're going to see exactly when and how we're going to use these. But these are very helpful and they're going to help us a ton. So now let's get into aligning and floats. And that was a super old way of aligning content and positioning content that we're not going to use, but I'm going to show it to you just for fun. Okay, after this episode, we are finally gonna build something out. Is it gonna be good? No, it's not gonna be good because we're gonna use a super old method of aligning and positioning our elements. So basically creating our structure for our website. We're going to be using something called floats. And I don't recommend this at all, but we're going to do it just so we can create a super basic website. After that, we're going to jump into Flexbox, which enables us to do some designs very simply, some layouts, responsive layouts, and all of those wonderful stuff. So bear with me, we're gonna do 2 more quick episodes, and later on, if we're also in the projects, we're also gonna cover other CSS properties and some other tips and tricks, okay? So I'm not gonna cover everything that you can do in CSS because frankly, that's honestly just a waste of time. We wanna know all the important stuff, and when we're actually building projects, it's gonna be more valuable to see it there than just me spewing it out here for zero reason. So one I want to cover, which I think is fairly important and you're going to use it a lot, is something called pseudo classes. All right, so I'm going to add a button here. I'm just going to keep it very simple and I'm going to add a submit. Okay, so there we go. So we can get that button here. I'm going to say button. Well, that's not a class, just a simple button. And I'm going to say padding. We're going to do 2 rem and 4 rem for the width and for the width. Yeah, that's what I tried to say. So take a look at this. We can style this the way we want, but let me kind of show you what these pseudo classes are. You can select the button and you can add this colon here. And what you do is, let me show you a few pseudo classes. One is called hover. And when we add it like this, what happens is if we add another property like background, light blue or light gray, when we hover over it, as you can see, that background changes its color. So only when your mouse gets hovered over that button, the properties change. Now we can do this on almost everything. So I can take the padding here and maybe I can make this longer. So that works as well. Take a look. So this is one that we're going to use a lot when we want to hover over something to give like an indication that when we hover over it, it's going to have some kind of effect. Let me also show you when we hover over this, as you can see, it's just a normal mouse. We can also change the cursor. So I can go to the button and add a cursor pointer to this. And when we hit save, you're going to see that it changes the cursor. So now it's like a clickable pointer cursor, and that's what I tried to say. Okay, so another one I want to show you is called focus. So let me copy this over here. I'm going to change this to focus, which all means that when the button is actually selected, it's going to change its color. So let me select a greenish color. So when we click on this, as you can see, the button turned green. And when we unclick from it, it's going to turn back to normal. So hover, focus, unhover. I can show you a better example with the input like this. So we add an input text, and then I'm going to copy this over and just change it to input. So when we hit tab, you're going to see if we hit tab here, now that's focused. If I hit tab again, that's going to be focused. You can tell by the blue outline on top of it. So that is focused. That's something that we are also going to use a lot. All right, and you've seen a few already. You've seen that we had that ends child, so ends child like this, right? And we can add a 1, and that's gonna select this one. Let me get rid of that really quickly. There we go. So that's gonna select only this button, the first button that it detects. So if I duplicate this a few more times, as you can see, that's the one that gets selected. Add 2, add 3, and that is a pseudo class as well. Now there's another thing called pseudo elements. Let me show you that really quickly. Let's get rid of everything and I'll just add a h1 that's gonna say hello. All right, a pseudo element is used to add additional content from within your CSS. I know, it's crazy. So let me show you. We can get the h1 at a font size of, let's say 4 rem. All right, let's make this smaller. Okay, so what you can do is you can say h1 and add 2 colons and say after or before. All right, and basically what after is gonna do is you can add content within your HTML here. So content, and you add 2 quotes and you can say hello me. And as you can see, it's gonna add additional content here. Now we cannot select this because this is done within your CSS, and in your HTML markup, if we check here h1, it only says hello. And this can be done as well with before. So we can say before, all right? And there we go. We can add some content before it. Now, honestly, this is mostly used not to actually add content, but to style an element in a few different ways. And we're gonna see in the last part of the series, right after this video, how we can use this in a more practical way, I should say. So, but I wanted to show you these so you know that you have pseudo classes and also pseudo elements. Okay, so let's take a look at the old ways of how we used to create layouts. Okay, let's throw together in this final episode a simple website. And I'm gonna introduce you something called floats. So let's cover floats. Let's start off with just a few boxes and then we're gonna implement a website. So let's do a box 1, a box 2, and a box 3. All right, I'm going to change the names of this. So you can imagine these as being just some kind of content on your website. So let's grab these. We're going to say box 1. I'm just going to add a arbitrary height to these and a width. Let's say 50% as a width, and a height. I'm going to set something like 30 rem and hit save. All right, let's also add a background color to this. Background light gray. So there it is. We can also change this so it looks more like a box. We can do a 30 rem. There we go. So that's 1. And then let's copy this over. Or actually what we can do is we can just duplicate this like so. All right, just so we also have the 30 rems on top of it. And then we can change the background colors. Box 2 is gonna be background of, you know what we can do? Actually, just add a border to this and not a background. So let's remove this and just add a border of 2 pixels. All right, so this is gonna be the size of the border. Solid is gonna be the type of the border. And finally, the color. We can just do black for now, okay? And basically we can change these to other ones, but they're not that nice. I can say dotted. But oh no, that looks terrible. So let's change back to solid. Okay, let's also add a bit of margin between these 10. Let's do 1 rem. Okay, perfect. So I have these boxes. Let's also add some content to it. Let's make these larger a bit. Let's do 50. Okay, very nice. Larger, 80. Very good. Okay, and I also want to show you another cool property. And here I'll just add a p tag lorem 50. Hit save. All right, just some text, and I can copy this over to box 2 and box 3 as well. Okay, just so we have some text. Okay, let's also add a font size here. So let's do font size, and we're gonna do 2.8 rem. Okay, perfect. So we have our content. As you can see, if I just change this to smaller, we're gonna have an issue. We can scroll, and that's something that you probably might not want to do. So what you can do is you can also limit this, and I'm gonna introduce you something called max width. So if I change this to max width, let's see if that has any effect. If we make this smaller, as you can see, the maximum has to be 80, but it cannot go above that. It cannot go above that size of the pixel. So as soon as it goes over, it actually wraps the text around it. All right, so we're basically putting a limit over our width. Okay, and this can be used also as minimum. So the text basically should have a minimum width of 80. It cannot be any smaller than this. That's what it says. So if I go smaller than that, it doesn't let it go smaller. So that's the maximum of the minimum, I should say. Okay, and we're gonna see this with height and everything, but for now, let's just leave it at max. So the text actually wraps around it. Perfect. Okay, very good. So that's step one. Now let's take a look on how we can position these. I'm actually gonna make this full screen like this, and I'm gonna make it a bit smaller. Let's do 60. Okay, what if I want to have this content, so the second part here, go up here? How can I do that? Well, I'm not sure. What can we do? Well, there's a property called float, and this was used to actually create layouts. So you can imagine like you can do these on divs as well, on elements as well, on anything that you want. So what you can do is I can grab the box 2 and I can say float. Let's try what happens. What happens if I float it on the left side? All right, that's some weird things happening here. This kind of breaks. As you can see, the border goes up. What happens if I do on the right? All right, the content kind of flows over on this side. And if you don't know which box is which, let's kind of add some background colors to them. So box 2 is gonna have a background, or we can actually just add a title for in now to make this a bit more clear. So let's remove some text from here. Let's remove some text from here. And let's remove some text from here. And we'll just add a H to box 1 like that, and box 2 and box 3. Okay, perfect. So when we add on the box 2 a float to the right, it goes on the right side. Okay, so that's what I kind of want. I want this to go up here. And the way you can do that is you can get the box 1 and float that on the left. So when you do that, you have the box 1 here and the box 1 there. So basically you can kind of imagine where you want your content to be. If I switch this over right and left and hit save, now the box floated to the right side and the box 2 floated to the left side. So this is how you can kind of position things the way you want. However, there's one problem. This one breaks, as you can see. And this was a big issue, and this is why I don't recommend it, just because it's very hard to style things this way. And you also have this issue where the height collapses and things just don't go the way you want. As you can see, we have the box 1, box 2, and that's it. This box 3 gets cut off. So the way you need to fix this is to add a clear, all right? Because what happens now is all of the content down below, so box 3, tries to be put up here next to the box 1. So let's change this back. Let me say left and right and hit save. And let's try to make this a bit smaller to see if we can see the results. So as you can see, you have these weird things going on here. So to fix this, all you have to do is go below the boxes that you added the float on, and then you need to clear it. So what we can do is create a class called clear like this and just add clear both and hit save. So now if I introduce this down below, so after the box 2, I'll just add a clear. This is gonna fix all of our issues. Okay, so there we go. It's a bit weird. So what you need to do is just add float left and float right to the elements and then clear. So the other content that you have does not break. Okay, but this is so weird, and if we have something more complex, this can get tricky, and also making this responsive and nice can also be tricky. As you can see, as long as it doesn't have space, it does jump down there, which is pretty good. but it's still not that great. All right, there we go. Super awesome. So now what I would want to do is maybe change this and don't add this max width. Maybe we can do 50%, 50% width, 50%. Let's see what happens. Okay, the content jumps down here because we also added, let's see, we also added some margins. So if we remove the margins, now it's perfectly stuck up there. So if you want to exactly split this up, now you have to take into consideration like how much space you want in here. So maybe I want to do 48% just to leave a bit of space hanging there like that. And then maybe we can add a bit of margin. So I can say margin of like 0.5%. All right, there we go. So we also have a bit of spacing. And also in the boxes, maybe we can add a bit of a padding. Let's do 1 rem. All right, so these are not stuck all the way up there. And then we can continue on with the box tree. So maybe on the box tree, I want this to stretch all the way. So I can say width 100%. And now it stretches all the way. Okay, so now this is a way that you can create some layout. So let's throw together a simple page here just to experiment with this and kind of mess around with this. So let's get rid of everything here. And another thing I want to show you is something with the height. So by default, the HTML and the body tag are going to take the height of the content that you have. So as you can see, it takes the height of the content that you have. So if you try to add maybe on a box 1, if you try to add a height of 100%, you're going to see that nothing happens. And the reason why nothing happens is because, well, it tries to take the height of the body, which already is the height of the content. So there's nothing to stretch, right? So maybe we just have this, let me just illustrate this a bit more clearly. Maybe we just have this box 1, right? So if we take a look at the box 1 height, it's just the height of the content. And if we try to add height 100%, well, that's not going to do anything because the body's height is already the size of the content. So it's like useless. So a way you can fix this is you can extend the HTML and the body's height. So you can say HTML body, and you can set that the height 100%. And now, as you can see, the bodies and the HTML's height extends all the way down, right? So now on the box, we also have 100% because we defined it here. So if I add 50, now it's going to be 50% of the body's height, okay? So this is a quick hack that you can do, but we're going to introduce some better methods that we can do this rather than adding HTML body 100%. But I want to clarify this as well, just for you to know. So let's remove everything and let's start off building out something simple. So let's just throw together like a navigation that we might have. So I'm going to full screen this. Let's go down here. And what I'm going to do is just start off with a header. All right, and in this header, we're going to have a navigation. So we're going to throw in a logo here, which is going to be a H1 logo. Now, I'm also going to give it an ID of logo. Perfect. Underneath, we're going to throw an unordered list. And here we have our anchor tags. So LIA, all right, just to keep the semantics correct. And I'm going to duplicate this 2 more times. I'm going to add the hashtag here, just so it doesn't actually bring us anywhere. Okay, here we're going to have home, this is going to be about, and this is going to be contact. Perfect. Okay, underneath, let's do maybe a big image underneath, all right, some sort of hero image. So we can create a section like this, and in this section we can also have a header, so we can say header, and here we can have a H2 that's going to say, let's make it about some kind of cooking thing. The cooking master. All right, and underneath here, let's throw a H3 that's gonna say cooking. I don't know what I want to say. By our homemade bakery. All right, and let's also. All right, that's gonna be good. I'm happy with that. And we're gonna keep this simple like this. Perfect. And you know what? Let's actually get rid of the header, and we're also gonna throw a button underneath. just to keep this a bit more simple. Button, we're gonna say bye and hit save. I'm also gonna add a class of hero to this, our hero section. And underneath, let's do maybe a form. So we can do a section, and this is gonna be called I'm gonna add a class of form section to this. We can also do a hero section just to keep everything consistent and hit save. Okay, and this, I'm gonna have a header that has a h2 and it's gonna say contact us. Hit save, and underneath the header, we are gonna throw in a form. I'm gonna remove the action for now because this is not really gonna do anything for us. And here I'm just gonna drop a label for name. And after this, let's write name in here. After this, we're gonna also drop in an input with a type text. Perfect, so we can now duplicate this 2 more times like this. We can change this for email, and we can say email. And here we can input type email, that's good. And we can also add on these inputs, I forgot to add a name that's gonna say name. On this one, name is gonna be email. And let's also add an ID of name input. And here we can add an ID of email input. Perfect, let's hit save on that. Everything is clear. And finally, maybe we have a label for a message, and this is gonna be just a text area with a name of message, an ID of message. There we go. And actually we need to change these here. We're gonna say for name input and for email input. Where is it? For email input, all right? And we can do message input here as well. Okay, let's copy and paste. Lovely, hit save. Okay, we have everything that we need. Okay, so take a look, this is what we have, looks lovely. Let's go to our CSS, let's remove the additional code. And all I have here is just the margin padding and the box sizing and the font size on the HTML. Lovely. Okay, so let's start off maybe with doing some simple things, maybe some global things that we can adjust, such as the size of our H1, of our H2s, of our headings, and maybe anchor tags. So what we can do is take the H1, add a font size of 2.8 rem. Hit save. All right, that's fine. Let's also get the H2 and just the H2. This is going to be a font size of 4.5 rem. All right, these are going to be the big sections on our page. Maybe smaller, 3.6 is going to be fine. Okay, there we go. I also want to add a bit of a padding to these. So let's do 5 rem top and bottom, maybe 3, and 0 rem left and right. Okay, just to space them out. Let's do 5. Save. Okay, perfect. So let's kind of focus on this one first, on the upper corner. Let's also add an li here. So we remove some basic stylings. Actually, we can grab the a tag here, because if you try to change the color of this, it's not gonna work. If I say li and add a color of red, nothing's gonna happen. So we specifically need to change the anchor tag because that's what gives the color to these, not the li. So these are laid inside the a tag, but to change them, we specifically need to select that. So let's add a color of black to this, and we might change this if we want. And let's remove the text decoration, and we say none, and that's gonna remove the underline there. Okay, let's also change the font size. Let's do 2.4 rem. Let's see, that's good. All right, I'm happy with that. Let's zoom out. Okay, and I also wanna, okay, so that's kind of it for now. And is there something else? The H3, we can change that too. So let's do H3. Let's give this a font size of 2.8 rem. That's good. And also the button, we give this a font size of 1.8 rem. Hit save. Okay, so So that's good. Now what I want to do is start making this nav. So I'm going to go all the way down here and I'm going to select my nav. I'm going to throw a background color on it. Let's just pick out something here. Shall we go dark? Let's go dark, some bluish dark color here. All right, something like this. Okay. And now what I want to do is actually change the color of these. So I can say color white because that's kind of hard to see. Okay. And as you can see, we also specifically need to change it on our anchor tags. So I'm going to actually go up here and change this to white. Now I'm changing everything. So all the anchor tags to white. So if I have any other one, those are going to be white too, and if I have it on the white background, you cannot see it. So in case you want to add additional ones and you cannot see it, don't panic. It's because we globally changed it up here. Okay, so if you remember, how we can move these is by using floats. So I can go down here, I can select nav h1 and I can say float left because I want this to be on the left side. Okay, now this kind of moves in a weird way here. So what I want to do is say nav, and I'm going to select the UL, and I want to float that right. All right, and now this breaks our height, so everything collapses in a weird way, but as you can see, it's kind of in the perfect position that we want it to be. So if I can drag this over, you're going to see that we have the home there and we have the logo. So the position is good, but it broke our height. So if you remember, we can go up here and just add a clear pseudo class, and we can say clear both. In our HTML, we can just add this class of clear right underneath here. So right underneath where you are finished with your floats. So I added the H1, the UL, and right after that, we add the clear. Okay, and boom, everything works the same way. Now, as you can see, our li tags here are also in a block style, and I want them to be one next to each other. So we can also grab that nav li and we can float those as well. Let's add a float to the left and boom, there we go. We have one next to each other. We can add some margins to them or paddings. Let's add a little margin here, and we're only gonna do it left and right. So the first one's gonna be 0 and the second one is gonna be 3, or we can do 4. There we go. I also want to remove those dots underneath. I don't want those. So what we can do is on the UL, we can say list style, and we can say none, and that's going to get rid of it. Perfect. So now I can maybe add a bit of space in between these. So I can go up here to the nav and add some padding to this. We can do 3 rem. All right, so that adds some padding all the way across here. Okay, so there we go. That's a simple way that you can create a nav. Is this the right way? I have better methods to show you after we finish this section. This is a pain, to be honest. But hey, let's continue. Why not? So we have this section here now with the hero, this one. Okay, so what we can do is get that hero section. And let's get an image, hero section. And what I want to do is add a background image to this. How can I add a background image? Well, let's go and explore and find an image. Let's go on Pexels. I'm going to open the file here, and hopefully the internet works today. Let's do something with food, bakery. Let's search. Pexels is slow today. There we go. Let's scroll down here. Maybe we can use this one. Okay, so let's get this one. We can do the large, that's fine. Hit download. And I'm just going to drop it in here for now. Now you can create folders to make everything nice, but for now it's going to be fine. Okay, we can go back to our CSS. Can I close this? Do I have enough space? No. Okay, never mind. No, close. There we go. So to add a background image, all we have to do, let me make more space here. All we have to do is say background dash image. And here we can say URL and add some quotes, and we can drop in the image, burger vegetables. There we go. Take a look. We have the background image. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. However, this is kind of small, so we can increase the height of this if we want. So let's go here and just add a random height. Let's do 30 rem. Let's see. Okay, that's still too small. Let's do like 100 rem. Rem. Okay, so something large like this. 80. There we go. I don't want this to cover everything. So perfect. So we have this, but as you can see, this doesn't look that great. So a way you can change that is by adding a background position. If we change the background position, we can move the image up, left, right, or bottom. So if I say top, it's going to move it to the top of the image. If I say center, it's going to drop it in the center. And if I say bottom, it's going to go all the way down. Okay, but this still doesn't look that great. So what we can also do is, let me remove this, is add a background position, not background position, my apologies, background size. And we can modify this as well. If we add cover, you're going to see that it says scale the image while preserving its intrinsic aspect ratio. So if we add this, as you can see, we see most of the image. And when we scale it down, you're going to see that it scales and it keeps the aspect ratio. All right, so that's a good step right there. We can also change the position if we want, maybe center, background position, and say center. Okay, let's see how that looks. Okay, I'm kind of happy with that because I want to see the burger and these chips, so that's good. Okay, so we have that. Now, what we can do actually is we can just align everything here to the middle. So how can we align everything to the middle? What we can do is go here and just say text align, and we can say center. And as you can see, that drops it perfectly in the center. We can push down the content. Let's just change the color to white for now, like that, and let's drop it to the center. So what we can do is add a padding top of 10 rem. Hit save, that drops it down here. We can drop it more, let's say 15, perfect. Okay, so what I can also do is style this a bit nicer because it doesn't look that good. And also, it's kind of hard to see the white, especially if you have something a bit lighter color. It's going to be way more difficult for you to see this. So one thing that you can do is add a text shadow. And by adding a text shadow, this takes 3 parameters. It's going to say 3 pixels, 3 pixels, 3 pixels, and a color. I'm going to say black, and I'm going to explain everything. So the first one and the second one is going to be the position of it. So if I change this to 10, as you can see, it moves it 10 pixels to the right. So the shadow now is to the right. Now I don't want this to be as large, so I'm going to keep it 3, so it's quite close to the white one, so it gives that nice contrast. This works in y-axis, so if I add 10 here, it's going to move it down this way, and minus is going to move it up that way. Okay, so I'm going to keep it fairly close with 3 pixels, and this property is going to increase basically the radius of the blur. So if I add something big like 10, it's going to get more and more blurry, so it's not that sharp looking. So this is fine, I think. It's pretty good compared to this. This is a bit harder to read next to this. This kind of comes out a bit more, so that's good. Next up, what I want to do is I want to maybe push this button down a bit and style it a bit nicer. So what I'm going to do is go to Hero section, and I'm going to say button. Okay, and this one is going to have a padding of, let's do 2 rem and 4 rem. Hit save. There we go. That's what we have. Maybe we can make this larger, like 6, so it's a bit wider. Let's do 4, or maybe 4 and 1. All right, I don't want it extremely large. That's good. And we can also add a margin top here of 1 rem. All right, maybe more. 3 or 4. There we go, just to give it a bit more space. Let's remove the background. We can add this background that we had up here just to kind of match the design. So I'm going to copy it from up there to here, and we're going to remove the border. We're going to say border none. to get rid of the ugly border. We're going to change the color of it to white so we can see the text. Perfect. And lastly, what I want to do, now as you can see, this kind of blends with the background, so that's not that great. Let's change the cursor to pointer. So what you want to do is have a pretty nice contrast in between these, the image and the button here. So what one thing you can do is either change the color of this, or maybe add an image that's not so dark, because if I change this to something more like this, now it's more visible. And you know what, we can actually add a custom one here. What am I changing? All right, let me go back here. Oh, I forgot the semicolon, so it broke all my code. Maybe we can do something more visible like this. Okay, so that's way better. All right, so that's what we have. That's the section. And on the contact one, let's move down there. What we can do is also text align this to the center so we can get the form section. We can say text align center. Let's take a look what that does. All right, so it aligns this to the center. Now we can get the form like this. And as you can see, these are kind of displayed in line, and this is not something we want to do. So what we can do is come down here and we can get the form input and the labels and the text areas. So I'm basically selecting all of them, and make sure to add form to all of these. So form input, the form label, and the form text area. And we can grab all of these and add a display of block. All right, and now they're going to be one underneath each other. Okay, so as you can see, the text gets aligned here, but the inputs don't. So the way you can align that as well is, let's get the form input, and we can add a margin of auto to this. Let's see, does that work? Okay, so that works. We can also do that to the form text area. Like that. Hit save. Let's go down here, and that aligns everything as well. Let's also just get the, we can add a font size here. Font size 2.4 rem, hit save. There we go, that's way better, way larger. Let's also add some space in between these. So let's go here and add a, we need margin on top. So we can add another one here, 2 rem. So this is only gonna apply to top and bottom, but this is gonna take care of aligning it in the center. So if we hit save, now we have more space. And finally, we can maybe add it to the button as well. Form button, and we can add a margin bottom of 2 rem. Hit save, and there we go. We have more space, or something big like 5. All right, way better. 10. We are ambitious. Okay, perfect. That's what we want. So now we can style this the way we want. For the button, we can also copy everything from here. So let's copy the padding, background, border, and color and cursor. Okay, and bring it down here. Hit save, and now we have that. Lastly, what I want to do is come here and add the width to all of them, something like 50%, so they match the same size. As you can see, it takes up half of the size of the screen, so that's good. But we added it. Let's just add this to the input and the text area, actually. So let's bring it down here. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so that looks good. We can also add it to the button. So let's add a width of 50% to the button. So kind of matches the whole flow here. So there we go. That's how we can kind of throw together a website. Now, is this responsive? Kind of, but not really. As you can see, when we go down here, that kind of drops there. It doesn't look that nice. And yeah, if this would be smaller, this would be super squished together here. So there are still a few issues here. And also just making this layout is a bit, it's just not that fun using these floats and then clearing things. So next up, we are gonna take a look at some better ways of doing things. So I apologize if this video was a bit long, but hopefully you learned a few things here. And also, as you can see here, I forgot to point this out. This these anchor tags here are not perfectly aligned with the logo here. As you can see, they're a bit more up there. So what you need to do now with this style is to kind of match the padding. So add the same amount of paddings and the same amount of margins or paddings, so they're perfectly centered here. Okay, but again, this is kind of hard, so it would be nice if you would have a better tool to make these layouts. And this is actually a very simple layout. It's a one column layout. We don't have multiple sections here that's coming one to the left and one to the right. It's just kind of everything dropping beneath each other. This is kind of the only two column layout we did with the logo and the UL here. So we had to float this. Other than that, we didn't really have to float anything else. Okay, stop talking, Ed. Show us the good stuff.